Long ago, when the world was still a very young place, the mighty goddess Athena sat on the banks of a great river and surveyed the world around her, and she saw the reeds growing in the river, and she began to think, for Athena is immensely creative. She has a mind of such resource that it can take disparate materials and transform them as if by alchemy into any number of things. And after some consideration, she took a knife and she plucked two reeds and cut them to shape and weaved them together with threads from another reed that she had split and turned into string. And when she had finished fashioning and creating, she had before her a two-reeded flute, which she called the aulus. And she sat and she played and she played and she played, and the music was wonderful, better than even she had imagined it would be. And she went off back to her great palatial rooms in Olympus, and there she played some more, and it was the first time the music of the aulus had been heard echoing through the halls of Olympus. And it would have gone on echoing through the halls of Olympus for perhaps thousands of years to come, had not Athena at that moment glanced across at the wall and seen the great mirror of polished metal that was hanging there. And she saw herself with a two-reeded aulus in her mouth, her cheeks puffed up, her face red and swollen from puffing and puffing, because it takes a lot of air to blow through a two-reeded flute. And she thought she looked so ridiculous and so silly that the last thing she ever wanted to do was appear in such a state before an audience for a concert. Whilst it is one thing to sit alone on the banks of a river playing for your own benefit, it is quite another to give a state performance, and she certainly didn't want to look that bizarre giving a state performance. So she lobbed the aulus out of the window, and it fell and it fell and it fell and it fell to earth, where it landed in soft mud by the river. Otherwise it would have smashed to pieces if it had landed on hard rock. And who should chance upon that discarded aulus a few hours later but a satyr by the name of Marsyas? Off he was wandering, scratching his goatee legs, his hooves leaving prints in the mud, looking for something or someone to do, when he chanced upon this wondrous thing that he had never seen before. And he picked up the aulus and looked at it and worked out how to use it, because of course satyrs are very musical creatures. They are very artistic creatures, as well as being remarkably lustful and remarkably thirsty. And he sat and he played and he played and he played, and it was a wonderful tune, a magical tune. And he invented and improvised new tunes as he played, working out the best ways to get the benefits from this wondrous thing. And he began to think of lyrics that could accompany the music. Obviously you can't play the two-reeded flute and sing at the same time, but he had satyr friends and nymph and dryad friends who could sing whilst he played. And so in his mind he composed the lyrics, and every so often he stopped playing long enough to sing a verse and think about how it would go. And this particular song was in praise of one of his favourite things. For as the people of the ancient world often said, Marsyas, if he didn't invent it, then he may as well have invented the very notion of parrhesia, of free speech, in a world of tyrants and despots and arrogant lords and condescending ladies who would censor all that those beneath them are allowed to say. Marsyas, and possibly this was occasionally fueled by a little wine, or quite a lot of wine, he would blurt out all manner of things to all manner of people. He would tell the beautiful that they were beautiful, but equally he would tell the ugly that they were ugly. He would tell the clever that their ideas were clever, but he would also tell the stupid that their ideas were stupid. And whilst the beautiful may quite like being told that they're beautiful, and the wise invariably do like to be told that they're wise, the ugly and the stupid very rarely appreciate being told that they're ugly and they're stupid, because usually they know only too well themselves what they are, and don't require some passing drunken satyr to point the blindingly obvious out to them, let alone to the entire world. And this particular song lyric that Marsyas was composing revelled in many of the occasions when he had blurted out the truth to various powerful potentates, tyrants, dictators, the arrogant, the unjust, the unworthy. And he began indeed to think about the people he would yet like to boast to of his own insights and wisdoms, the people he would yet like to point out truth to, painful, difficult truth to. And at some point along the line, and this composition of music and lyrics was fuelled by rather a hefty wine sack, which got emptier and emptier and emptier as the day rolled on, he eventually began to think of those gods up there in Olympus and what he would like to say to them. And somewhere along the line, of course, one of them heard, for it is never wise to pass ill favour upon any of the gods, for you never know quite when they are listening. And the particular god who heard this rather colourful verse of lyric was Apollo himself, who had been listening for a while, not to the lyrics, he wasn't much interested in them, but he had been listening to the music of the aulus and wondering if some usage could be made of it, for music is the particular domain of Apollo. And when he heard the rather unflattering things that Marsyas was saying along with the music he was playing, he came to earth with a great thud and stood there in all of his magnificence, all of his glory, for Apollo is remarkably handsome, remarkably glorious. And under one arm he had tucked his lyre, and he upbraided Marsyas for his, frankly, quite rude and presumptive lyrics, particularly the lyrics about the gods, and then began to inquire as to the nature of the instrument that he was playing. Had he made it? And Marsyas was honest enough to say no, he hadn't. He had merely found it, discarded in the mud, but he now claimed it for his own. And he was audacious enough to say that this flute created such beautiful music that it was at least as good as the music of Apollo's lyre, if not, perhaps, better than the music of Apollo's lyre. And Apollo is not known for his tolerance of such hubris, such arrogance. And he demanded that this upstart satyr face him in a contest. And what is the prize to be of this contest? Demanded the satyr. Apollo thought for a while and considered things that he could put forth as potential prizes should the impossible happen and this upstart satyr win a musical contest. He thought of gold and of silver and of swords and of fine silks and all manner of things, and before he had finished contemplating what could be offered, Marsyas himself jumped up and said, "The winner should be able to do anything they like to the loser." And his eyes were rather lustily flowing over Apollo's golden muscular thighs as he was contemplating the anything that could be done should he win. And of course at once Apollo said, "Done! That is a very wise and sensible choice of prize." He passed over the contest to his opponent. Marsyas began to play and play and play, his cheeks puffing out as his lungs were almost exhausted, blowing upon this two-reeded flute until he could puff no more, and he came to a silence. And then Apollo took his lyre and he began to play. His fingers were a blur and the music was wonderful. It lifted the heart, it inspired the soul, it healed the sick, it almost raised the dead. It was so beautiful. And by the end of it, both had to admit that the other's instrumental compositions were beyond compare. Even this bizarre new flute, this aulus, which was a new instrument in the world and therefore not well understood, had been played nonetheless with such movement, such passion, such beauty that, well, Apollo was a little loath to say it was as good as his lyre, but it was good. It was remarkably good. And there came a bit of an impasse. And Apollo said, "I have a trick, I will show you." And he took his lyre and turned it upside down, and he began to play upon the lyre upside down, played a tune as beautiful and as wonderful as the one he had been playing the right way up. And at the end of it he said to Marsyas, "Now can you do that with your flute, with your aulus?" And the poor old satyr took it and looked at it, and of course there is only one end you can blow through on a flute and have any effect. I mean, you can huff and puff on the other end of it, but it won't do a damn thing. And especially if there's two ends to it to puff upon. And poor Marsyas had to admit that he could not best or even match Apollo on this particular trick. "Right," said Apollo, "I have won." And with that he whipped up a great whirlwind, and the poor old satyr was carried up and up and up into the air, and they rushed across the land before coming back down again at the edge of a great river. And Apollo, in a state of fury and rage at the arrogance of this satyr, of his rude claims about the gods that he had been making earlier in the day, of his arrogance in trying to take on the gods themselves in the supreme arts of music, he whipped up his magic, Apollo, and flayed that poor satyr alive until the goat skin fell off of him. And the poor creature hung from a tree, screaming and howling in pain, and the blood gushing from him in a manner that doesn't really bear thinking about, and flooding down to form a great river that mingled and matched with the water that was already there. And whilst no one had thought of a name for that river before, forever afterwards it became known as the River Marsyas, born of his blood and of his tears, which even when he was dead continued their movements around the river forever and ever to this very day. And as to his poor old goat hide that was flayed off him, there are some who say it was just left to rot, and others who say it was taken up and prepared and made into a great wine skin in remembrance of poor old Marsyas's own love of wine, and the fact that maybe his love of wine had led him to boast rather unwisely and earn the wrath of Apollo. But the flute continued to be blown and played long after poor Marsyas had died, and those in the ancient world at least who played upon it remembered the satyr, remembered his love of Parrhesia, of speaking the truth to those in power, to praise that which is good and condemn that which is bad without fear or favour of repercussion from those too up themselves, too arrogant to ever hear the truth.